bow drill, right? So the thing that I love about bow drill, why I get excited about it, is because it's a primitive machine, right? And whoever figured it out, because it happened all over the world in different ways, friction fire, but bow drill specifically, because they built a machine out of organic materials that is human powered. And when you do it, when you perform it, and when you're successful with it, and you get your first fire, it just changed my life, right? My perception of it. It like felt like it connected me with everybody who's ever made fire in history. And that's kind of the thing that separates us from animals, is that we can do this, right? We can make fire, because before then we were very sedentary. We couldn't travel. It limited our travel. It made our food better, more digestible. So there's a lot of things that happen because of fire. And so to be a fire keeper, you have to own at least one method of friction fire, right? You have to be able to make it from natural materials. Now keep in mind, I'm using paracord, but easily substitutable. So the pieces of the bow drill, all right, so start out here. So this is our bow, hence the name bow drill. And these can be of various lengths and materials, but I like mine on the smaller end, right? And I typically find mine with a fork at the end to make this accessible. This is the Quinn hitch, and we'll get into it later. I'll show you how to adjust this, but this is great. And with a slip knot or some sort of fixed end loop at the end, this never changes, but this allows for adjustability for our spindle size to accommodate different spindle sizes. Typically you want one that is from your armpit to, some people say their wrist or their fingertips. This is really long for a lot of people, but also good. I'll start beginners off with this. The reason being, when we're bowing, we get more revolutions for the energy, right? Which is great. But when you get more advanced and you understand, you can get away with a smaller bow, which is also more packable, right? So that's our first component. Now we're gonna be driving or spinning with the spindle right here. Now typically I like mine to be no bigger than my thumb and no smaller than, say, an average finger, right? So definitely not pinky size. That's when we start getting into hand drill sort of stuff. But yeah, ring finger, middle finger sort of diameter. And I like the length for me because our bodies are very symmetrical. I like it to be about this big, but a little bit bigger, because as we use it, it's gonna wear down, right? On this end, on both ends, and we're gonna have to tune that up in carving. I try not to go any smaller than that, but this one is on the bigger end of what I would choose to do. And the reason this ratio is important, I'll show you why here. It's almost elbow to wrist, right? You'll see why when we get into the posture and the stance of bow drilling. And there's different ways to carve these, but that's more advanced. Now, the way that we set that up, we're gonna put our spindle. You can see it's like a pencil. We have like the eraser end and then say the writing end, something like this. How we're gonna put that in our spindle, we're gonna put the blunt end towards the sky, gonna pinch that in the middle there, and you're gonna rotate it around, and you can feel that grip. I like mine in the center or just south of the center, just lower of the center, because when I'm in bow drill position, I feel like I have more control. And we don't want it too high because it's gonna pop out of your handhold, and we don't want it too low because it's gonna pop out of your fireboard, your hearth board. Now, we need something to hold this to allow it to spin freely and to drive the friction down. So what I have is my handhold. This is a Exogero ponderosa shell. It's like a 60 million year old fossil of a crustacean, like an oyster sort of mollusk. And I just drilled out a little divot in the center there, you can see. You can use different materials for this. Some people use a harder wood. You can use a whole bunch of things. Some sort of limestone works well, anything like that. Some people use like bearings and stuff like that. And you can lubricate that divot that you build in there because you want all the friction to be going down. So you want to minimize the friction up top. And that's why we use a harder material. So you're going to be holding it down like this. Now what this interfaces with is your fireboard or your hearth board, right? Now this is its own sort of situation. You can see that this board has been well loved and pretty much used. All the holes have been used. I have a little bit of life left in this one, so when I demonstrate, I'll be using this hole. But it has to be very specific. And so when we're thinking about who made this up, you have to burn in the hole first, right? So we burn it in using the spindle, get it deep enough to where the shoulder of your spindle disappears into that notch. That's how deep we want to drill that in initially. And then we have to carve a very specific notch, a V-notch. But you'll notice that V-notch does not go to the exact center of the burn-in. It's just shy of the center, and that's important, because if not, it's again very advanced, but you're going to be losing a lot of capability from your notch. So to carve these very specifically and very intentionally. And on the bottom of mine, I chamfer the edge of that. You can see a little chamfering there, smooth that edge. It allows for a little bit more air and a little bit of more accumulation of the dust, the charred dust that we're trying to build up, because as we're bowing, this wood material is turning, it's dissolving basically and turning into charred dust, and it's going to start accumulating in a cone shape here and filling up. And then when we get enough accumulated and we have enough pressure and speed, like friction, if you put your hands together, Miyagi-Do, we need both pressure and friction to build up to the point of ignition, which is 451 degrees roughly for most wood species to ignite. And then we have our coal, and it'll be like a cone of incense. It'll look like that, and a little bit of glowing ember. And then once we get that, then we're good to go. But we need something to catch that coal, right? So a coal catch is what I call it. And we can use a whole bunch of different things. Some people use their knife, but what it needs to be is it needs to be reasonably sturdy and something that we can maneuver. So some people will even set a bit, something like that. So as that dust accumulates, when we have it, that's what we're going to use to transfer to the last component, which is we need to build a tinder bundle. Now the difference between tinder and kindling is tinder needs to be fine enough to accept a spark or a coal, as where kindling can accept like an open flame, such as a lighter or a match or something like this, like an actual open flame. The coal doesn't have enough energy to, say, light a proper stick on fire like an open flame would, or something like, something like this. So we need very fine material and a bunch of it. So in this instance, where I'm from, where I live in Austin, we have a lot of ash, juniper, and cedar. So I take the bark off the trees and it comes off in long strips like this, right? And the reason I put a bandana down is because we want to catch all that. We don't want it going into the forest floor, because we need a mix of very fine material, stringy, sort of longer material, and we need very fine stuff up into powder. So we're going to break this material up. Again, you can see the fine dust flying in the wind too, which is why we need to be very mindful of which direction the wind is coming from, and that this is very suitable material. It's not too wet. It really can't be too dry, but we definitely just don't want a whole pile of powder, but you kind of got to work with what you have. So we're going to break this up quite thoroughly, because when we get our coal, we want it to be able to transfer that energy, because it's going to start breaking apart and everything's going to catch on fire. If our coal is weak, and that can happen due to many reasons, the material you start with, the relative humidity, that all changes, and we have to account for that. So we don't want it to be too porous to where the coal just burns straight through before it can ignite the rest of the tinder bundle. And we don't want it too thick, because the coal's not going to be able to light this chunkier, heavier gauge material, right? So we want a bit of both. But what we're aiming for is, like they call it, a bird's nest. And so you can see as I'm on this bandana and I'm breaking this material up, you can use certain grasses. You just want to make sure that the cuticle, the outer layer of the grass, is not too waxy and things like that, because some grasses do not ignite. So we need to experiment with the materials we have in our area. Tulip poplar is good if you live in the hardwood forests. Yeah, so we just have to experiment, but really bark of this caliber is really good to use. But see, underneath this all on the bandana, I'm catching all this very fine powder. That's what we want in the center of our bird's nest. So we're going to be preparing this ahead of time. And the bandana, maybe I don't want to build a fire here, but I find good material. I can go through all the process and everything like that, and I can wrap this up, put it in my backpack, keep it safe from the environment as much as possible, and then I can have this transported to where I go eventually and make my fire. Maybe it's not suitable, maybe it's early in the day, I'm not ready to have my fire, but this is a great way to transport and keep it safe. So when we're building our tinder bundle, again, we want it as big as possible. This is just an example. It's fine. But so we're gonna want something big like a bird's nest. And when we're building this, going to be adding to it. But in the very center, we want to start putting this very fine material in the center, right? And packing that in. We don't want it hard, right? When I say pack it in, we just want to make sure that it's getting intermixed with the bigger materials there. Okay. And it'll be fluffy, and then it'll be more stiff and rigid to the outside, because once we get this to light, we're going to be transferring this to your fire, where we're already going to have our sticks prepared, our thin and crispies, you know, pencil lead size, and then going smaller to pencil size, finger size, wrist size. So we're going to have all those materials staged, which we don't have now. We're just demonstrating the actual process of bow drill. So some people get real fancy with it, and you can take a bigger piece of bark and wrap it around like that to have it, because if not, we're going to be pinching it, and some people burn their hands. I've lit my beard on fire and stuff like that. This makes it fancier and gives you a little bit more grace when removing this thing, because it's very fragile. So we want to make sure we're not manhandling this thing and grasping it and ripping it apart, because the actual act of bow drilling the effort is hard enough. So we want to make sure that we're not destroying it in the final hours with the final act of blowing it to life. Okay. So again, and we can play with this a little bit more, but I think we're good enough here. So I'm going to set this aside real quick, and then we'll get into the position of how to bow drill. Okay, so that's good. So a cold catch, what you want it to be. So when we're setting it up, I'm going to show how I arrange everything, and then we're going to talk about body posture and how our body should be positioned. So something flat, something organic. I'd avoid using leaves, because that coal, if you get it big enough, if you're taking your time, that coal can burn through your leaf, right? And then you have a problem, because then your coal is going to be on the ground. So we don't want that. But before we want to do that, we want to make sure our area is flat as we can get it. Again, we're not looking for perfection. We're just trying to minimize as much bullshit as we can, or minimize as much things that could hinder our efforts as we can. So this is good. I'm not asking for anything perfect, but we just want to make sure there's no rocks and deviations. So I'm using this notch. So I'm going to our fireboard with our coal catch underneath. Now when we're talking about the spindle, I have previously used this, and we can see how it's rounded off and everything like that. That's not it, because what's happening when we're under pressure with heat and we're drilling with this, it's going to be burnishing, so it's hardening this wood at the very end. So what I always do is I say we're cleaning this up. So I go ahead and take my knife and I cut off all that char, but I'm trying to make it like a golf ball, right? Just kind of irregular and kind of chunky, just so it has edges and so it can grab and start producing dust and everything like that. Because if you don't do this, when you hear squeaking in bow drill, typically that's what's happening. It's a combination of this being burnished, so it's polished like hardened glass, if you imagine, and the same thing is happening in your notch. It's very polished and hardened as well, so it's like glass on glass, and it'll start squeaking and screeching. And the other reason is sometimes you're too deep in the board and it's just contacting the shoulder, and so you can just hear that, right? Most people don't know what that is caused by. That's what it is. So when you get deeper into a hole, it's going to naturally happen because it's grasping this portion here, which is just getting polished, but you can hear it's not happening in this fresher notch. So that's to diagnose your board. That's what's happening, if you're wondering, because some people, that squeak is really loud and annoying, especially if you're doing it with a lot of people. And then the same thing, you might need to tune up your end here, and that's why I choose to carve mine like this. Some people will just carve it at an angle, just kind of like a cone shape. And what happens though is as we're drilling, this is going to wear out and flatten, and you're going to run into the same problem up top that you would at the bottom. And again, the reason is we don't want that, is we're trying to transfer all the friction and force down here. You can actually start coals up here, you'll see that with people who don't know how to tune that up and how to mitigate those problems. So thinner up top, and then again, the least amount of friction. You can put chapstick in here. You can put all sorts of different stuff. Some people use like face oils and such. But again, if you have something like made of stone, you don't have to worry about that. Or our friend Nathan Valentine, he'll make some with copper, and he'll put something in there that's very friction free. So, all right, so now that we have all of our pieces, we're gonna test our spindle and make sure our tension isn't too tight and not too loose. So again, the blunt end towards the sky, in between the bow and the string. We're gonna pinch about center. Like I said, I like mine a little bit lower of center. And then we're going to twist to the outside. And like somebody described it as like shears, you can, like garden shears, and you can just complete that. Now we're gonna wanna hold that, because if not, it's gonna flip out, okay? So we're gonna make sure we wanna hold that. Now, is this too tight? We'll see. It might be too tight, but we won't know until we kind of get moving. Okay, let's talk about our body position now. So some people get barefoot, but you have to be in a very stable position. And this is when I mentioned the length of the spindle to our body. This is why, because most of our bodies are very proportionate to themselves. So we're gonna get down in a position like, take a knee, like if you're in sports. I'll move this a little bit so I'm not in your light. Okay. So, since we're using this knock, we want to be placing, if I'm bowing with my right arm, I'm going to be putting my left foot on the board, okay? And we're going to want to be as close to the hole as possible in the middle of our foot, because we're really trying to drive that home. I'm moving my shoelaces so when I'm bowing, it doesn't get caught up in my boot laces. This is why some people get barefoot. Either way, it's fine. So right there, and we're going to want to be very strong. This is a right angle here. I'm not leaned back and I'm not way over, okay? I'm not to the side. Either way, I'm trying to have my knee directly over my heel or where I'm contacting that board. Now, when we look at this linearly, this is a good angle to see that. Some people be really far out here. This is not good, and I'll show you why in a second. I'm almost putting my knee in line with my heel here, okay? We're in a very powerful position, okay? Now, the reason that we're in this position here is so when we're bowing, okay, we want our arm to be swinging back and forth, just like we're walking. This is a very natural position. Our arms are meant to move like this. You'll see a lot of people trying to bow this way, like perpendicular to their body. These muscles are not strong enough to sustain that, and you're wasting a lot of energy as if we were to bow this way. It's much more naturally, you're in line with your body and the physiology of your muscles and how they work. This is very weak, and you'll notice if you try this, just walk like this, it just feels weird, right? So that's what we want to be doing. Now, when we're talking about why the spindle height is important, this is the exact reason. Because we want it to be stable as possible, okay? So I'm going to take the pit of my elbow, I'm going to place it against my knee. And I want to make sure there's no visible light between my forearm and my leg. And this crook in my wrist is going to be right here nestled up against my shin, okay? Now you can see how I said this spindle was a bit too long, right? This would be perfect, right, to where I'm not up here. Now I'm almost unsupported. You can see how my elbow came up away from my knee, so I'm losing a lot of stability here. And this is where a lot of people fail, because they'll be out here doing this, or they'll have a spindle that's way too tall and they're just like floating it, and you can just see how unsupported that is, right? It would be like if I'm trying to bow and hold it straight, people start doing this number. If you can lock that elbow in your forearm against your shin, crook your wrist, now I'm directly over that spindle, and it's perfectly straight up and down. That's how we want to be, okay? And so when we start bowing, we want to use the whole length of the bow, okay? See how I'm using the whole length? My hand is on the very back of the bow. Some people will be here doing this and short stroking. Don't do that. That's why a longer bow, especially for beginners, is great, because I'm getting more turns per energy, okay? When we're bowing, a lot of people will start rocking and doing this number, bowing like this. And you'll see the string start to work its way down or up. And the closer the string gets to either end, you're gonna be driving the force. It's no longer in the center, so the likelihood of it popping out from the bottom is high. And same thing if I get too high up here, just by physics, just by the motion, it's gonna pull it out of the handhold. So we wanna keep our bow level. That's why doing this is more in control, because your hand has a subtle, on either side, it raises up just a tiny bit. But for the most part, if we can drive it and push it like this, it's keeping it very parallel to the ground. And that's, again, we want to make sure we're not digging into the ground on either end. So now we're going to demonstrate the process. So everything's good. Our kit seems good. We're going to start slowly and build up. It's important now to be relaxed before the effort and to breathe. A lot of people, especially adults, kids, just beginners in general, they hold their breath and they are doing this, and it's not good. You have to breathe. Like fire requires oxygen in order to breathe and to build, so do you. And again, I prefer, so just for why, I'm having the notch facing out towards the camera just so you can see this process. Typically, I like it faced towards me so I can see what's happening there. I feel like I have more control of it because I can respond visually, tiny micro movements that I know how to adjust my body and adjust the pressure, the downward pressure and the speed. I can see that because of the quality of the dust that's accumulating. If it's too light brown, I know I need more friction and more downward pressure. If it's too black, I might be pushing too hard, okay, and causing me a lot of issues, right? So it's a feel thing. A lot of bow drill is about feel and how to respond to that. And I find that martial artists, dancers, people who are very aware of their body, they more easily respond to this feedback, how to move their body. As you can see, strong position, spindle about halfway down, a little bit south, and then we're gonna start bowing. Got my arm locked in, and again, we're gonna start out slow. See, we already got smoke, so that's okay. You can see that dust accumulating. So my bowstring is a bit tight. This is good. This is why I prefer the Quinn hitch, because with a simple adjustment, I make some slack back here, I pull that down just a tiny bit, follow that around, and that pulls out, I loosen my string with this much adjustment. And so right now I still have some smoke, it's still a bit hot in there, so I'm not gonna waste my time, but I just needed to explain that to you. You can feel it was jerking, you could see the board moving, which is good. And we don't want it too tight or too slack. So let's try again. Better. So we're gonna be building up. See, again, slow, I'm using the whole length of the bow. We're building up material. This is getting stuck a little bit, that's fine. Oh no, hold on. We'll loosen that up just a tiny bit. It's fine. We still got time. This spindle is not made for that knock. I try to make them specifically, but it's all right. Give her a go. So if you can see, I don't know if you can zoom in and see that dust, it's light brown, which is good, but it means there's not enough friction, not enough pressure. So we need to increase the pressure and increase the speed, and that'll get darker and black. So that's what we're gonna aim to do. I'm gonna tune this up real quick. Gently tap our coal out. So we have our coal. Now we can wait. We have time. We want to guard it from the wind. We don't want to be blowing on it, but we want this to coalesce and to get formed fully. Now this is the time I'll take to make sure see, you can hear I'm out of breath. My tinder bundle is good. And we're gonna transfer this over. Again, minimizing distance, because some people are shaky, the wind. And we're gonna very gently place this coal, this baby coal, and all that dust in the center. Now fire burns up, so I'm immediately gonna grasp this thing, fingertips, and start blowing into it and through it. You can see it slowly start spreading. So I'm tilting it up away from my face. We already have some fire. I can use the wind, use my hands like this. Our breath has moisture too, so we want to make sure we're not blowing it out. And there we have it, right? And so then we would turn it. We would let this burn. We would place this in our fire pit
with our materials already set up, and then we would arrange it just so. But yeah, that's basically the premise. And see, it's burning into the center. Sometimes if you don't have enough material, it's too loose, you'll blow that coal right out the back and won't have your tinder bundle ignite. There we go. We did it.